the government is changing the law to pardon more gay and bisexual men.
Redress now to be available for all those who wish to avail themselves of it.
The move could wipe gay offences from the criminal records of thousands.
The police and the military authorities went out of their way to hound and persecute gay and bisexual men.
But for the men who have lived with these convictions for decades, the way they were treated by the state can't just be wiped from memory.
It's the 35 years afterwards of misery and hardship I've had to suffer for no reason.
And I was guilty of nothing. The only people that were guilty was the two police officers that stood up in court and lied through their teeth.
How did these convictions impact their lives? And is a pardon enough to right the wrongs of the past?
My name is Terry Stewart, and in 1981 I was arrested here by two plainclothes officers and accused of importuning for immoral purposes.
So is this where it was?
Yes. This iconic island, as they call it now, was 41 or 42 years ago. I mean, obviously this is all, the whole area has changed completely, especially this.
Terry's hands were covered in grease from his bike chain. He went in to wash them and was followed by two plainclothes police officers.
One put his hand on me and said, "Sir, would you like to come upstairs? We want to speak to you. We're arresting you." I said, "What for?" He said, "Oh, importuning." Well, I didn't know what importuning meant then. I knew it was an offence to do with homosexuality or some sort of a sexual offence. So I came up and they said, "We're taking you to Bow Street police station where you'll be charged with importuning for immoral purposes."
Where are we going now, Terry?
Well, this is the original route that the police took me when they arrested me. It was here that they charged me, and then I was taken next door a week later, and they attempted to prosecute me, but I had to go to the higher court because I pleaded not guilty in here. If you were convicting people of offences and giving them a criminal record because of some relationship to public, like committing an offence in public, then clearly they were attempting to wipe homosexuality in any shape or form from the public domain. That's why they said in the original change in the law that you could be homosexual in private. Well, that's all very well, but how do you get from public to private? How do I meet someone in order to make them my partner, the love of my life, spend the rest of my days with them, if I'm not allowed to publicly behave like a homosexual? And what they were doing when they were convicting myself and other gay men was trying to eradicate any outward expression of homosexuality whatsoever.
As a young gay man, it's quite unsettling to think that just 30 or 40 years ago, I could have been arrested for simply chatting up another man. And I think it's a period in British history that we just don't talk enough about. It's a commonly accepted myth that homosexuality was decriminalised in England and Wales in 1967. That's when the Sexual Offences Act decriminalised consensual sex in a private place between two men over 21. But gay and bisexual men continue to be cautioned and convicted for the crimes of buggery, gross indecency, and importuning. Convictions for gross indecency actually doubled in the years following 1967, peaking in the 1980s. And these crimes remained on the statute book right up until 2003. Since 2012, people in England and Wales have been able to apply to have some gay convictions wiped, but campaigners argued the scheme was too narrow. The Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act, which became law in late April, extends the scheme to all gay men who are convicted of behaviour that is now lawful today. Those who have died will have pardons awarded automatically, but those who are still alive will have to apply. The law change came thanks to the efforts of Professor Paul Johnson, Lord Cashman and Lord Lexton, who spent the best part of 10 years pushing for it in Parliament.
I became involved back in 2012 when the campaign to bring this about first reached the House of Lords, and this amendment completes the process. Those that are alive will need to make application. The Home Office say that it's a simple process. The Home Office often says these things about processes. They don't always turn out to be simple, but I hope in this case it will be extremely simple.
For gay men who were convicted, the impact wasn't just short-term, it was quite literally life-changing, and they had to deal with the effects for decades. It was illegal for gay men to serve in the armed forces until 2000.
My name is Stephen Close. In 1983, I was charged with gross indecency, sentenced to 6 months in prison and discharged from the army. One particular night I was out with friends and I got chatting with this soldier and we all went back to his room for a party. And there was chemistry between us. His roommate was very drunk and he'd collapsed and fallen asleep. And we began chatting and that led to kissing. And he suggested we go somewhere more private.
But unbeknownst to Stephen, the roommate had seen them kissing. They were interrogated, sentenced to 6 months and discharged from the army. How did that impact your life afterwards?
I found it very difficult getting work. Because under the Rehabilitation Acts of 1974, it was a criminal offence not to disclose the conviction when applying for jobs. When I started getting rejections, I've suddenly realised all these opportunities are not there for me. There's nothing at all. The only thing I can do is cleaning, bar work, warehouse work. And as time went on, the development of the internet came. It was so easy to do criminal record checks online. So basically all I was doing was looking for jobs and working in places where I know they won't do a criminal record check. I have no pension or anything like that, no savings, because I've always had to work in really low paid jobs.
And it wasn't only not being able to get good work that Stephen had to deal with.
In 2013 the police visited me demanding DNA. Apparently under new laws they could obtain biometric samples. I explained to the police officer that it was no longer offence what I was charged with. The ban on the gays in the army had long since been lifted, but she said she's not interested. All she knows is I've got a sexual offence on my criminal record.
It wasn't a permanent job, it was only a temporary job, but I'd have a contract there for a year, 2 years, I'd be working there for 2 years. And if somebody comes along and says, oh, by the way, see that guy working in such and such a department, you know he's been done for importuning. And I'd be gone.
And for far too many years, society turned a blind eye to these injustices. The MP, Sir Desmond Swayne, now regrets the stance he once took on gay rights. You used to think that homosexuality should be outlawed before you had what, in your words, was a transformation. Can you describe what your mindset was at that time?
It's difficult to think back into the mindset having escaped from it. A combination of intellectual laziness and I think pig-headed stupidity, a refusal to engage in rational thought. And it's so much easier, you know, to say, oh yes, it's awful, isn't it shocking, I agree with you, without giving any thought to the matter at all.
Of the 65,000 men who were convicted under these laws, an estimated 15,000 were still alive as of 2016. Yet an overwhelming majority of them haven't taken up the opportunity to have their criminal records wiped. Home Office figures reveal that fewer than 500 people had applied to have their crimes erased from their record as of November 2021. Fewer than 750 convictions have been considered in total. Almost 3/4 of these convictions weren't deemed to be eligible, and so the applications were rejected. This means that only 198 convictions have actually been wiped. Some applications were rejected because the offences weren't connected with sexuality, like the possession of drugs. Others were turned down because they were convicted of sex in a public toilet, which remains an offence today. But it's the low number of applications overall that's the most puzzling. Why have so few men applied to have their convictions revoked?
My name is Philip Harper-Deakin, and in 1971 I was charged and convicted of gross indecency. Bizarrely, I heard somebody drop a pencil on the other side of the door, the lock-up, and I did nothing about it. I carried on. The next thing was the doors being kicked down by all these cops. Trundled off to the police station and charged with gross indecency. As a consequence of the arrest, I appeared in court, and the sentence was 2 years probation and 1 year psychiatric treatment. The psychiatric treatment involved electric shock treatments. It was basically imagery, black and white images. They'd flick through random things, and each time it came to the male form, or parts of the male form, they'd zap you. And that's how it continued. You know, each time you got aroused, then it was, you were zapped.
But unlike other men I've spoken to, Philip doesn't harbour any bad feelings about his arrest.
I knew what I was doing. I was very aware I was breaking the law. But at that time, there was very little options available for a gay man.
Will you be applying for a pardon or a disregard?
I won't be applying for a pardon. I knew exactly what I was doing. I'd been doing it for 6 years previously, and I continue doing it afterwards. It's meaningless. It won't impact on my life now. It didn't impact on my life then. And I've led a pretty amazing life.
But many of these men believe that a pardon alone isn't good enough, and that the government has the power to do more.
I'd like an apology off them. I'd like compensation as well. Because, I mean, when I was in the army, I signed a contract of employment with them. They broke it, not me.
I want compensated for the wreck and the ruin they made of not just my life, but the lives of 15,000 other people.
Could a public inquiry help put the ghosts to rest?
I'd say that there is certainly a very strong ethical case for a public inquiry into how the police and other state institutions persecuted gay and bisexual men down the centuries. We're talking about, of course, particularly in the last 100 years or so. And what is so shameful is that not a single police force in Britain has so far apologised.
But not everyone agrees.
Public inquiries amount to nothing except somebody saying something which we already know.
My only issue with public inquiries is the cost.
The Home Office declined to respond to a request for comment, but in January, the Home Secretary said,
"I hope that expanding the pardons and disregard scheme will go some way to righting the wrongs of the past and to reassuring members of the LGBT community that Britain is one of the safest places in the world to call home."
We asked the Metropolitan Police if they regretted criminalising gay men post-1967. They said,
"Policing, like wider society, has changed significantly in recent decades, and it's important to the Met that we continue to evolve to meet challenges. We continue to seek to address both conscious and unconscious discriminatory views within the force."
The Ministry of Defence said,
"The historical policy prohibiting homosexuality was wrong. Defence is jointly commissioning an independent review with the Office for Veterans Affairs to better understand the impact and implications of the pre-2000 ban."
The granting of pardons has certainly helped some of those who have applied, but for many others, the feelings of bitterness and injustice at having been labelled as criminals for several decades can't be shaken off so easily. And that's something a public inquiry probably wouldn't be able to rectify. Time has moved on. It's difficult to right the wrongs of the past, and the clock just can't be turned back.